Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Really important, I think, video and fun video to have Brian Manzella on. Hey Brian.
Hello, Brendan.
Okay, so this is something that I think golf instructors need to either figure out or decide where they are on this issue because it's becoming very confusing for regular golfers. And that's what I want Be Better Golf to be. It's almost like all the people who watch and myself to be like an advocacy group for regular golfers who are absorbing this instruction and want to know, like, okay, what do I do? So I think the transition is very confusing for golfers what to do with the club, because in golf we've always heard this term: there's feel and there's real. And anytime you go to an instructor and you tell them that you want to do something, they say, oh, don't do that, that's only a feel, that's not real. And then if you tell them that you don't, or something else, they'll do the other side of the argument and they say, no, you really want to do this. So they use that just to basically say whatever they want to say. The feel is not real. So what we're talking about in this video is what actually is happening in transition with, sometimes, we see Alex Noren, some other people in slow motion do this. We see the slow motions of videos where Jack Nicklaus is going from the ground up, but he says he's releasing it straight from the top.
Yep, exactly like you just demonstrated.
What is happening with the actual forces in transition, Brian?
And torques.
Is feel real? Forces and torques. And is feel real? Or are these guys just kind of making up a story in their head, these great players?
Yeah, just think about how unlikely that is, right? I'll give you a couple of quick analogies. One, it's just like riding a bike, meaning that you learn to ride. Nowadays, the bike thing's been taken care of. We've had 2 kids in our family before their second birthday without training wheels, very little bicycle, little bicycle now, 2-wheeler. They could drive all around this neighborhood. Wouldn't let them, but they could. Under 2 years old. They both, because they just found the better way to do it, right? No training wheels, low enough for the feet. Okay. But the analogy is, Brian, when's the last time you were on a bike? Like 4 years ago, right? But I could get on a bike right now, drive around my neighborhood, and 2 or 3 of the tricks I used to do, I might hurt myself, but I can still do them. Mm-hmm. Okay. Why can you get back on the bike? Because you know what it feels like, right? It's a canceling out of your center of mass and the bike's center of mass and momentum, right? You're canceling out all these things, and you ride the bike from here to Slidell, Louisiana, is 35 miles from here. No problem. Okay. When me and Michael Jacobs and Dr. Nesbitt, and Mike and Dr. Steve got together and took this software that Steve had developed for the USGA and the National Golf Foundation and turned it into something with Mike that you could use in lessons. We did every kind of test known to man. Partially because we're curious, wouldn't you, if you had the dang thing, since this is one of one. And 2, because there's always pushback, There was people, competing people. And, this doesn't, what if you did this? What if?
And what does this software do for people who haven't heard of it? It shows
so
all
you take optical capture, right? So, all this stuff out there now where you got, a video camera and it's turning it into 3D. It's a nice toy, but you're not going to do serious 3D with this. You're not going to write any papers on this. Optical capture, Mike started with 8 cameras. He's got 14 now. You got 1 million markers on the club. If you want to talk about the body, he's got 57 markers on the body now. But we're just talking about the club. So you got 6 markers on the club. And you got these cameras, around the room, and 360 samples a second. Every one of these cameras are trying to look at every one of these 6 markers. And it's giving you this spreadsheet at the end of the day of what the club was doing in space. This is kinematics now. This is kinematics. So here's the golf club. And it's at X 1487.3 millimeters, Y 637.1 millimeters, and Z negative 324.4. And then in the next frame, right, that little movement, then all those same things again to the 10th of a millimeter. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how a program like Gears can draw this club in their program, or the program that Mike has, and Jacob's 3D. And then you see the club and you got all the bending modes and the twisting of the head and all this kind of stuff of what's happening. What you could see, obviously slowed down and recreated, inverse dynamics. All right. Now, if you can do the math, you can say that frame 357 to 358, the club got there because the golfer did what to the club? He pushed it, pulled it, and twisted it a certain way to move it that way in the swing. That's what you do. What you see is the kinematic. What you do is the kinetic, right? So when you're Ben Doyle, my old teacher, used to say, when you go grocery shopping, what are you pushing the cart with? And everybody answers it wrong. They say with their hands, but nobody's actually pushing the cart with their hands. They're holding on with their hands and they're pushing it with their feet. If you asked any lady walking through Winn-Dixie around the corner, or Publix in Florida, or HEB in Houston, what are you pushing? They would tell you that I'm pushing with my feet. And so, okay, well, Brendan and I are going to jump in the basket like two little kids. Now, is it harder to push? Yes. Right? So that's feel. Would it look like it was harder to push? Not really. Not if it's a good enough cart and big enough for us to get in and not topple the thing over. It's not going to look that different. So one of the things that we've been able to do is prove all of these people in these books that have been written since the 1800s right. And people like you said, Nicholas, told Mike Malaska, I'll release it like this from the top, the famous tumble, right? This is what the golfer's doing. Ben Hogan said, I wish I had three right hands. He knew what he was feeling. Boy, I can get this thing on the ball and it goes far and it goes straight. But man, if I had three right hands.
Also, there was like a British instructor from 1920s or something that went on to teach a whole bunch. The guy that would hit the tire all the time. Do you know what I'm talking about? And then, yeah, and he saw his, I think in like the 40s or 30s, he saw his first on video the first time and was shocked because he had been teaching people a certain thing, I think similar to what we're talking about. And he was shocked at that the club wasn't doing what it looked like on film.
So it's the opposite, right? So great. This is why you do a good job with these things. So when Varden saw his swing, he said, that ain't what it feels like. So when Cotton saw his swing, that ain't what it feels like. So because you're operating with this stick that has a certain amount of mass and a certain mass center, and a club head that's got the same properties, and you got a ball you have to hit, and you have to put these inputs into the club to make it hit the ball, period. There's really no argument with that. There's really no argument in golf that that's the case. The whole issue is you've got one person in the whole world that can run a swing right now in real 3D, regardless of what anybody else tells you. That's the facts. But one of the things that people need to understand about this transition thing, which is where you're going with this. So one of the things we found out, and I think one of the things that you were looking at some graphs of mine a few weeks ago that's sort of confusing is, okay, you're doing the input, but you're dealing with this club. It has a mass and it has momentum, and you may not overcome that momentum that fast. My best analogy of that would be me and Brendan. Brendan decides to come to New Orleans to film stuff here at the studio. And you know what happens in New Orleans? About once a year, it gets icy. And he's got his rental car in the driveway right here. It's a nice long driveway and pretty steep on the way off. And he's parked behind my car like I tell everybody to do. And he goes, Brian, You think my car might slide into the street? I went, oh my God, we should go. And there it is. It's starting to move as we run out there. So what would we do? We would both run in the grass, get behind the car, and start pushing it. Now, if you had video of this, the car's moving. Me and Brendan are pushing up the driveway. It's going down the driveway. And we overcome its momentum, and then we get going up the hill. We were pushing the same damn way the whole time. So if you asked us, well, what did you do to move that car? We pushed it toward Brian's car, but it went backwards. Did you pull it backwards? No. So that's part of why when you look at the actual forces and torques, like I got some graphs here on my phone, then you go, well, why could something be, toward the target when obviously like people laying the club down? One of the things that Michael Jacobs found, I'd say there's a good 10 things that he just totally uncovered. I think by the time he got to about 100 swings, like he's run 100 swings, and now it's just starting to like bad players do this, good players do that. Everybody says, oh, people, there's a million ways to do it. Yeah, you start seeing stuff though, right? And one of them was that this thing that took me a long time to wrap my head around, but I'm going to try to, for the viewers here, try to make it as simple as possible real quick. Some of the moments, alpha was always positive in transition. So there's two things, some of the rotators, okay? The combination of the two rotators. I can rotate it by twisting. I can rotate it, and I'm translating it too, by pushing and pulling. Okay. So since we're talking about this action, right? What if I applied no beta force in transition? Well, how would you do that, Brian? Does it look like I'm pushing this way or this way if I just lower the club like this? No. So here's my swing right here. That short line is transition.
Is the top of the backswing, or sorry, transition.
Transition, and the blue line is the beta force. It's the line that it's like almost tracing a straight line on is also the zero line, just happens to be. Okay, so now that's what most people that are decent looking golfers do in transition. They don't push this way or this way. They're lowering the club, they're pulling, and they're doing all kind of stuff. Okay, so we don't even have to worry about the force in this swing. How about that? We don't even have to compute that. Now we go alpha torque, right? The twisting action. So go right here. Alpha torque is the blue, and it is positive right away. The kind of purplish blue, because there's two swings in them, and they're laid on top of each other. So there's a perfect example. I have no force to reckon with here, and alpha torque was positive. That golf swing looks like that. The people who love shallowing would say, Manzella's shallowing it. He's Mr. Anti-Shallow. But no, it's not shallowing. It's alpha rotating negative. Why? Because it was getting thrown that way on the backswing, and some of the moments were the other way at some point, and long before the end of the backswing, long before me and Brendan turned that car around and started pushing it back up the driveway, I'm applying some of the moments positive. So not only do you apply some of the moments alpha positive in transition, again, if you force it this way, it rotates negative. If you didn't torque it, right, forced it forward, that would be this. You see some people that like to lay down, they like to teach this, right? Hands go out like this. Okay, so I'm forcing forward. Let's just take all the negatives and positives out. And I'm not torquing. Some of those two things is some of the two rotators. I'm forcing it this way. I'm getting negative rotation out of that 100% of the time, and I'm not torquing to combat that. That would be some of the moments alpha negative. Isn't that what some people do? Nobody. Nobody's doing it. We haven't found anybody. Even we get people that would come in the height of the lay down craze, and they would twirl it more than Brendan ever did. Brendan had a nice twirl the first time I saw it, not so much anymore. So
In your ridiculous trials, did you ever try to get a swing that
oh
would be some of it
yeah.
negative?
Yeah. No.
And you still couldn't
No,
do it.
because what you're doing is so it started making the most sense to me when I got my overhead camera here in the studio, because I can make a swing like it's nothing where I do this, right? I just did it, right?
Yeah.
And you see it and you go, okay, look at, he's taking it back. And then on the downswing, he's flattening it out. Everybody thinks I'm wrong here. Find a studio or teacher that'll hold a camera up in the air. You can do this anywhere if you got a long enough selfie stick. Got to sync it with a normal view, like a face-on view. Or down the line. You think what you're seeing in a lot of these people, the proponents of the laydown move, is backswing standing the club up and downswing laying it down. But when you look at it from overhead, almost all of the laydown, not all, but almost all of the laydown, the club is still going backwards. It's still going, like what you would call a backswing. But it looks funny when you look at it. Like, it doesn't look like this looks like downswing. Mm-hmm. But when you watch it from the other angle, the club is still going this way.
Oh, it's just having more set, almost like a float loading set.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a card trick. I've done a video 2 or 3 times where I take this plain board, and there's all kind of ways to make it look like that. None of that has anything to do with today's conversation. Okay. What today's conversation is that you have to alpha rotate this club to get it back to impact. I mean, this is a normal top of the backswing position. I've got to do this part to get to impact. What am I, in 0.2 of a second? I'm going to go, instead of this action right here, because this is kind of where I am at the top of my swing, right? I lowered it, and that's other forces and torques we can talk about if you need to, but I'm not doing this because I'm going this way and then this way. You think you can do it, you can't. And that's why there's a perfect example. If it was such a good idea, why did some people totally ruin their golf swing trying to do it? Because they were trying to do it. It's not saying, well, Brian, this guy obviously does it. Look at him, right? And then I was looking at Sergio's swing a little while ago in here, and I mean, it really changes angle, to the angle, like this much, like 3 or 4 degrees. He's lowering it a bunch. If you actually tried to do it on a downswing, what you would probably do is you would change your late backswing very strangely. And that's why you see exactly what Brendan was talking about a second ago. You see people teaching this. Now, they don't realize they're making my point, but they're making the point we're making today. The reason it could still look like this on video, but you're doing this instead, is because you're doing it in the backswing. That's why they're teaching this kind of takeaway, no alpha rotation really yet, this kind of top of the backswing in their mind, and then this is transition, right? Because what they're doing is they're throwing the club negative. See, it goes out here. If it didn't flop negative, this is negative. That's positive, right? If it didn't flop, it'd be Matt Wolf. So you go like this. You flop it, what you think is backswing, but downswing, but it's mostly backswing. And there's so much negative that you're tumbling the crud out of it right away just to slow it down, which is how I came up with my sickle theory. Which was just something is going on. We're talking about very standard looking swings now. In backswings, nobody's paying attention to the shape this club makes. But apparently it has everything to do with transition. Well, it does, because you're already applying the force that you're probably going to be actually applying early downswing, late backswing to stop the club. So where that club comes from And what it's doing will have a huge effect on what it actually does in transition, which is why all the people who like the club to look like it's laying down all like the flop.
Yeah.
They like the flop, right? Because that's negative alpha rotation, some of the moments, and you're pancaking the other way to hit the golf ball and transition. And it's one of those things where it's just exactly the same thing as down by the ball. So down by the ball, boy, can you see this on overhead? Everybody's some of the moments alpha negative right around here. Meaning they're pushing force across the shaft. They're pushing harder than they can torque through it. So if I pushed, and you saw how the club went backwards a little, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I pushed and it didn't go backwards, I torqued it to prevent it from going backwards. Some of the moments would be negative. If I pushed and I rotated it forward, some of the moments would be positive. It's always negative down by the ball right around here because you can just push it so much harder than you can torque through. You just can't win.
Mm-hmm.
And people, I can just see the group of golfers, I won't name them right now, teachers that'll say, oh, they always find somebody that looks like this. They had no force across the shaft anyway. The people, right, they had no force. These little golfers, how many really? You go to Costa Mesa, and how many people look like that? Everybody looks something else because you can, when you overhead, you'll see you can't win. Now, some of the moments, the sum of the rotators is negative, but the club is still going positive rotation. It's just slowed down the angular momentum of the system. It's slowing down by the ball. And because it's slowing down by the ball, that's where you get this thing. You've seen people jump up and down and have their faces turn red on positive lead, lead deflection. Oh, how can you be torquing it forward if you're in lead deflection? Because you're pushing it way harder than you're torquing it forward. And the sum of the moments alpha is negative. And the club really knows only a little that the difference between you getting the club to rotate this way because you forced it and because you torqued it that way. So that's how you can have positive alpha torque, which almost everybody has down by the ball, like 99.9% of all the swings made probably in history, or at least in our lifetime, positive alpha torque. But they had so much beta force the other way that the sum of the moments are all going negative down by the ball. It's just a phenomenon of how the golf club works. And it's way more that way with a driver because when that mass center gets right there, you start looking at overhead swings. Everybody has a tough time, kind of lining the club up. And that's why too much force across the shaft. The people have too much force across the shaft. They're screwed with a driver because they'll never quite get it out. So the guys who've worked on this, and gals, who've worked on this stuff, right? That's force across shaft. They're generally terrible drivers of the ball. And every single person that I know of that ever did ball hitting like that, okay, for a decent amount of time and taught themselves to do it, got the pitching yips. Because you're going to really lose. You're going to be putting this force across the shaft, and you're just not going to be able to torque through it. And trying to torque through it's going to be a yerk at best.
So you think you should put force across the shaft, but you should also be giving it positive alpha at the same time?
Yeah, and what people need to understand is that the force along the, I don't need a plane for this. The predominant force in the golf swing is negative gamma force, which is me pulling this way on the grip. And if I just hold on to this club like this and pivot, I didn't do anything. I didn't change my hands, nothing. My nose is running, I'm not doing anything else. That's gamma force. I'm applying negative gamma force by just turning negative gamma force by curving this club on the backswing, negative gamma force by building up speed. So when you're pitching the ball, you're going to have negative gamma force just because you're holding on and pivoting, hopefully. And then if you, that's That's going to have some offset to this mass center and create some lag, right? If you just do like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
All I did was hold on with loose wrists and pivot, right? And that's all from gamma force. Now, if I add a little negative, this toward the target's negative beta force to the gamma force,
Oh, yeah.
then you start trying to square that up at the ball when you're on a tour as Tiger, when you're on a tour, cut slightly damp morning, fairway around the green, run up apron, you're in a heap of trouble.
Okay, I know there'll be a lot of questions about this, so put them in the comments and we'll try to get them. In just like maybe like 1 minute, Brian, if people are doing this, then the normal golfer that already is really over the top, what do they have to do first so that they can take advantage of this but not have it actually happen?
They need a ton. Well, first of all, they got to solve their club face issue, right? Which might just be gamma torque, right? Twisting the shaft. Might be in the grip. Help them twist the shaft. They just need way more gamma force, right? So if I put this thing on my shoulder, Mr. Hacker golfer would, if they, you had a little programming for their brain, a little chip that they want to put in our brains one day, and they applied the same force and torques to this club that they do when they make this terrible swing with this towel on their shoulder, it would look like this. It would be a 2-year-old kid right there sleeping. You wouldn't even wake him up. But if you, that's what's good about why there was some, like a little bit of a craze in the teaching world with swinging ropes, because you at least, for me to do that, I had the gamma force it.
Yeah.
Right now, the reason why it's no good as an only thing drill is because it doesn't respond to torque, right? But if you were just trying to teach somebody gamma force, you get a bath towel, they could just swing the bath towel and hit something like this little pony wall I got right here. Just if you swing it good, you'll hit the crud out of something, and if you swing it poorly, you wouldn't wake up a puppy dog.
Right.
And most people don't have enough of that, not because they can't do it. They don't have enough of that because if they do it, they slice the ball off the face of the earth and they start slowing that down to help them, win you're losing, but to win the alpha battle to square the club up. Because everybody's talking about, look at this. There's one guy in particular, all he thinks the whole golf swing is this, right? But this club going around the clock is squaring that club up too. That sucker is 90 degrees open right there, and it's square right here, and I'm doing no twisting. Just think about this. Homer Kelly wrote a 241-page book that everybody thought was complicated called The Golfing Machine, and there was all these trillion ways to hit a golf ball. He never even had gamma rotation in it. Not saying you can play golf without gamma rotation. You can't. He whiffed. But that's not the point. The point is he knew that a lot of squaring the club up wasn't gamma. So you get people
like
that
a screwdriver similar to like
right. This action right here. This is gamma rotation. So the harder, here's an interesting one for you right here. Because all these force and torques and sums of the moments, they all have effects on the other force and torques because it's one system, right? You apply a ton of gamma force, gamma torque is much harder to do. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why people don't look like they could snap the towel when they're swinging a golf club, because they figured out if they make a swing where they wouldn't snap a towel, they can get that wide open club face more open, which is something that's curable pretty quick.
All right, guys, thanks for watching. If I know there'll be a lot of questions about this or qualifiers or your own opinions, put them in the comments below. I'll make sure that Brian sees them. We'll address them in the future. Click the subscribe button. It really helps this channel a lot. And if you want to see more with Brian, or if you want to interact with him, go to X or go to Instagram. They're both Brian Manzella. If you search either one of those, he's the first thing to pop up. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.